How are we doing today? Today we're going to talk a little bit about research in a variety of different forms and how it can be used within this industry of sport, recreation, and physical activity. And we start with this basic idea. What is social science? Social science for us is the overarching framework for how we will better understand sport. The hard sciences focus on the physical world, things like chemistry, biology, the physical sciences, that type of thing. They are an important part for understanding people in sport, but our focus in this class is going to be on the social aspect of individuals and groups of people that are associating with sport. A little bit different. The social sciences, though, do adopt the scientific method as a way of providing not only legitimacy for the process, for in terms of like how we find information out, but also it provides us a structured process and protocol for predicting and understanding human behavior and interactions. In addition, being curious as to why something happens is a great example of self-reflection. Self-reflection is an integral part of changing, evolving, and becoming more efficient in making decisions, which are going to benefit the organization. As you can see from the diagram at the right, Wallace attempted to illustrate the cyclical nature of research by representing how theory, hypotheses, just educated guesses, observations, and then generalizations really work together. They are in a circle, meaning you can start any place on the circle and still know that the end result is going to be respectable and valid. For example, we know that women consume exercise differently than men, right? Based upon previous experience of maybe working in fitness clubs for years and years, our beginning theory is going to be that women will participate more in this new wellness program, and this is going to involve our theory, our hypothesis, that type of stuff, right? So we're in this organization and we believe, because of what we've seen over years and years of work in the fitness industry, that women are going to be involved in this wellness program more so than men. Well, during the class, which runs, let's say, 12, 14 weeks, we noticed that only 60% of the participants are women. All right, well, this is the example of observation. All right, we notice that 60% of the participants in the class are women. So our conclusion or our generalization is going to be based upon the information that we had, what we thought was going to happen, and then what we saw actually happening in the classes. And so the empirical generalization is our conclusion that the previous thought that only women would participate in this wellness program might not actually be accurate. So this says to us that what we do, the types of questions that we ask, these things in the organization are starting to change. Things in culture perhaps are starting to change, and that's going to impact the products and services that we provide. Just an example of research, how research is going to be associated with day-to-day workings and decisions in organizations. But ultimately, what is research? Well, research involves a prefix of re, which just means to do something over and over and over again. And then research also has the word search, meaning to find. That is all we're trying to do. We're just trying to find answers to questions that we have. At the end of a search, you hopefully have found your answer and completed whatever goal it is that you're trying to complete. Research in its most basic form involves questions, answers, maybe a modicum of predicting future behaviors, and then most importantly, we need to have the research inform how we're going to make decisions in our organizations. This is where the popular phrase of data-driven decision making comes from. Demystifying the research process is crucial. So what we like to do is break it down into a couple of common sense components. Research does not always involve tons of numbers, tests, or even a research lab. It can if the questions that you're trying to ask and then the answers that you want to find necessitate these attributes. But the basic components of research are relatively simple, and they include the following. Number one, identifying what we already know, finding what we have. That's it. Maybe this comes from a quick internet or social media search. Maybe you have kind of a common theory of how you do things in your organization, or maybe you want to learn more about specific concepts, such as how to motivate your employees. You simply need to ask yourself, what do we already know? That allows you the base foundation to move forward. Secondly, what do we want to know? This is a question that may come from your boss or your board of directors. It may not come from just you. But regardless of where it comes from, the question must be answered. This is going to be your hypothesis or research question. Number 3, how do we find out that information? How do we answer the question that we just posed or someone just asked us? There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. If others have already asked and answered similar questions and you trust how they did it, then you can oftentimes replicate what it is that they did with the hopes that maybe the conclusions are going to be similar. Regardless, you want the conclusions to be useful. And then finally, how can we use the information to make decisions that are going to impact what we already know about the organization? But maybe even more importantly, how can we adapt this new information and move forward with it? Here's a quick little example. I was asked by a boutique health salon involved in cryotherapy to help them develop an internal data analysis plan. They originally marketed their products and services to boxers, the CrossFit community, young athletes, those types of demographics. Your basic weekend warriors, if you will. The idea was that their services would help them and other athletes recover more quickly and stay involved in their active lifestyles. So we took all the information that they gathered. In this particular organization, client information was put into the client booking system. We were able to take that information and put it in some forms so that we can analyze it and really understand. And what we found is that contrary to their original marketing strategy and belief, their client base was primarily married, older women that were using their products and services as a way to increase functional lifestyle and quality of life, and then also this whole idea of skincare. As a result of taking that information, understanding what it is, asking those questions, being open to the answers, they were able to evolve their marketing strategies and their social media campaigns and maybe even their price structure to better suit this new main constituency. Research doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be quality. In keeping with the scientific practice, it behooves us to learn the proper jargon and definition associated with physical and social scientific thought. A theory. And what we want to do is keep all these things very simple. A theory is just ideas that help to explain or describe something. Most people have a theory as to why it's going to rain or why it's not going to rain. Why people are going to consume certain products and services while others will not. Those are theories. A variable, which is associated with social scientific thought, is just an element or factor that is part of the change. And you have independent and dependent variables. So an independent variable is something like your gender. It's not going to change. But the independent variable can influence something like your perception of athletic wear. All right, so in that instance, the dependent variable is literally dependent on a host of other things. So maybe even your perception of merchandise and athletic wear is influenced by a lot of different things. Those independent variables could be gender, they could be race and ethnicity, they could be self-esteem in terms of how comfortable with your body you feel. It could be things like socioeconomic status and how much money you have to spend, all those different types of things. Population and sample. Population is the all elements. So this is every single element that fits your definition. So if we're looking at childhood obesity and you define children as between the ages of birth and under the age of 18 in the United States, then the population is all individuals in the United States that fit those parameters. That's a lot. So in science we tend to take a sample, which is a small group of those elements. There's a very particular way to go about doing that. It can get very complicated if you look at the Census Bureau and kind of some of the work that they do. It can be highly mathematical, but they do that so that the sample that they draw, the small group of elements, is going to represent the larger population. And then finally we have analysis. And this is, you have the information, you have to understand what it means. And this can be through interpretive or statistical types of analyses. Interpretive is going to be more like you interview someone and they give you an answer, and how do you, as the employee, as the researcher, how do you interpret what they are saying? Okay, that's interpretive analysis. Statistical is, you're going to run the stats. You're going to have your bar charts, your pie charts, maybe a chi-square, a correlation coefficient, all those different things, and they will tell you what it is that you're looking for. A little bit more on research methods. Research methods are simply just a way of accomplishing something in an organized way. You want to have a framework, you want to be organized so that you know the information you're gathering is done so in a scientific way. That way you can be more confident in the conclusions. Qualitative methods, and try not to get bogged down in the way that these words look, but qualitative versus quantitative methods. Qualitative methods tend to be inductive. So you start with information. You talk to people, and from there you figure out what's happening in the organization, which is different than deductive methods that we'll talk about with quantitative methods. Qualitative methods usually do not rely on large theories, if theories at all, and they tend to focus on people's words, their actions, their emotions and experiences, and then sometimes even the stories that people have and that they tell. It's very humanistic. The person is at the center of qualitative methods. Quantitative methods tend to be deductive, meaning I believe that X, Y, and Z is going to happen based off of what we know in social life. And I want to see if this information contradicts or falls in alignment with what we already know. You deduce, as it were. It usually starts with the theory. And this is what we talked about earlier with looking at consuming fitness or exercise here in the United States. Women tend to consume fitness and exercise in different ways through wellness programs and activity programs, whereas men tend to be more associated with something like weight machines or free weights. Right? We start with a theory, and then we find information, and we try to describe or represent that information with numbers, percentages, different types of pie charts and bar charts, things like that, so that we can predict the likelihood that something's going to happen again in the future. Within the world of sport, qualitative methods can take the shape of interviews, maybe focus groups, looking at social media and website comments, or looking at Instagram and the types of pictures that someone is posting, or the types of comments or likes and things like that associated with different social media posts. Think of interviewing parents about why they volunteer for boys soccer games but not girls soccer games. That would be a great example of qualitative methods. Quantitative methods involve oftentimes things like a content analysis, where you count the number of actions or behaviors associated with something. Surveys are another common one. Oftentimes large organizations or governmental agencies will gather lots of information that are made available to people, like the CDC, in terms of looking at recreation and sport participation in the United States. A great example of quantitative methods in sports involves surveying spectators at a professional golf tournament about brand, service quality, and sponsorship recognition. Both of these types of qualitative methods or quantitative methods are different, and they have their place depending on the type of question that you ask. The rationale for using research methods is pretty simple, is that we want established theories, concepts, and methods, or as we talked about earlier, these ways of knowing, so that we can be very systematic and organized with how we understand associations between different variables, or how we predict people's behavior. Also with using organized research methods, it allows people a sense of transparency. They know what you're doing and how you are arriving at your conclusions. And the reliability is the aspect that people can maybe use the same process if they want. If they're undergoing a similar type of research project in their particular organization, they can look to you as a way to get started for finding that information. Validity is, are you making sure that you are measuring what it is that you say you want to measure? So if we're talking about sport participation and the positive impacts it has on youth sport participants, you probably aren't going to go and talk to um, local students in the grade school that are not involved in organized sports. It just doesn't sort of seem to make sense. The other thing that's really important is that when you start thinking about this basic adage from sports psychology, really is that the best predictor for future productivity is past performance. And so understanding time, understanding information, and how all these things work together is very important for us within the world of sport and seeing how decisions can be made. Another type of Another type of way of being involved with research, or research as part of this process, is there's this thing called intervention. Interventions have a long history in the social sciences and especially in public health, and so it really makes it perfect for our purposes. Interventions can be applied to a variety of aspects of sport recreation and physical activity, including things like coaching, whether it's sports coaching or business coaching, behavioral health settings, therapeutic settings. Interventions are important with regards to understanding leadership, for understanding different aspects of consulting, looking at trying to increase efficiency, all these different types of things. Interventions, the basic universal process involves identification of some sort of outcome that's not meeting what you think it should be. So when we say suboptimal outcome, you're going to observe something. You're then going to try to research and brainstorm solutions as to why that thing is happening. You're going to then implement some sort of change in behavior. Maybe that's your education. There's a variety of different ways that we'll talk about in a second, but that's the intervention. And then you're going to measure the outcome for change. You don't know if the change that you implemented had an impact unless you evaluate and reevaluate. There are two major types of interventions that we will talk about. One is the individual development intervention, and the other is the organizational development intervention. And as you can tell from the names, the individual development involves the person. This could involve, you kind of think of more your traditional sort of recovery, rehab type of intervention settings. You have the surprise intervention, where you don't necessarily tell the individual you're going to be in part. You have the invitational intervention, where you invite someone to be a part of what it is that you're doing. These things are usually associated with some sort of cognitive therapy environment or a behavioral health environment. But an example for us in the world of sports could be something like this. An athletic department working with counselors develops mental health support plans for individual student athletes that have suicide ideation. Those would be individual development types of interventions. An organizational development intervention usually are planned activities that originate from a person or group outside of your organization. Maybe this is a consulting group. Maybe this, in the world of intercollegiate athletics, comes from the campus community as compared to within the athletic department. But oftentimes these organizational development interventions are designed to identify and impact personnel in some way, and then also increase the functioning aspect of the organization. Consider this sport example. A newly formed women's professional hockey team. This staff that's newly formed is learning about their coworkers' strengths, their weaknesses, and their vital emotional needs. You get to know everyone so that you can work together as a cohesive group and do the best that you can for this new professional hockey team. Organizational development interventions are interesting because it's the bulk of what it is that we will talk about within this course. It doesn't mean that individual development interventions are useless, because they're not by any means. But for the purposes of this class, we're going to focus primarily on the organizational development interventions. And there are 5 major types of organizational development interventions. One are just the diagnostic activities. And this is where maybe you interview coworkers or you do a participant observation, try to get to see what's going on, and you try to baseline the quote-unquote health of the franchise or the organization. Team building is going to be another type of organizational development intervention. And team building involves cohesion, group morale, and then solidarity, which is this whole idea of social bonding. How close, quote unquote, is the group. Sensitivity trainings are another one. This involves trying to educate people or eventually change their ideas and behaviors through kind of an educational or classroom type setting. Intergroup relations. These things tend to involve understanding how to outline a grievance process, understanding how to resolve conflict, understanding how to negotiate and work together, cooperation. And then process consultations. These usually involve the consultants coming from outside again that identify and evaluate things like the climate of your organization, the organizational culture, how communication is patterned within this group, leadership styles, and these things, these process consultations are going to be very, very important for the larger organizations. When you start thinking about, a professional sport franchise or a very large athletic department where you have a lot of working components within that type of organization. As you can see from the graphic, a brief summary of the basic intervention process involves observing and identifying behavior that needs to change. Then you have research and brainstorming possible solutions. You identify a plan of action to address the negative behavior, and then over time you evaluate the success of the entire process, which is why we have over here we have a funnel. So observations, research, and intervention, the active part of an intervention, these things are all funneled together, and the output is the evaluation down here at the bottom. Well, evaluation is part of this larger process of reevaluation, which is we work everything down through the funnel, and then as we evaluate, we circle all the way back up through what they call a feedback loop, and we start the whole process again and again. Research, intervention, understanding who we are as people, understanding ourselves as organizations, these things happen over time. Also, one of the things I wanted to do is that when we start thinking about examples of interventions within sport, recreation, and physical activity, the case study approach is a proven way in terms of critical thinking to educate students and practitioners to new ideas and applications. And that's what we're going to do in the next few slides, is just provide some examples of sport-based interventions. Interventions in sports coaching. Coach Ross has noticed that Mark, his starting shortstop, has been struggling in his classes ever since he came to Sedgwick County Community College. He's barely passing his classes, but seems to be a very smart student. Coach Ross gives Mark a book on various baseball situations, but Mark does not score well on the quizzes associated with that book. When discussing the same baseball situations orally, though, Coach Ross notices that Mark knows all the situational variables and what to do. A possible resolution. Coach Ross uses the campus's resources and the athletic department personnel to help Mark become diagnosed, adapt, and overcome his previously undiagnosed learning disability of dyslexia. Mark is now able to develop new tools and strategies to address this ongoing lifelong disability. Coach Ross took an active role in understanding his player. He noticed that intelligence was there, but how intelligence was manifesting itself was the suboptimal outcome. As a result, he outlined the resolution that was listed there on this slide. Another scenario involving health behaviors. Tabitha is a certified personal trainer. She has a bachelor's degree in exercise science, a master's degree in sport management, and is certified to consult with clients in regards to nutrition and physical activity. She has a client wanting to lose weight for health-related reasons. She has her client keep a food journal, log her physical activity, and fill out a questionnaire asking her about her family and friends' leisure time activities. From the information gathered, this is what Tabitha decides to do. Tabitha identifies that her client needs a holistic health program. Client uses food to cope with stress and has a family and a group of friends that are not supportive of an active leisure lifestyle. Tabitha helps her client see how emotional, physical, and nutritional health are all connected and must be focused on in order to be holistically healthy. Another example of interventions in a health behavior type setting. What about in regards to leadership? Leadership is very unique and involves a lot of different aspects. The scenario. The Central Kansas Arrows is a professional baseball franchise operating in a small but urban Kansas market. Recent racial tensions in the community have highlighted the need for understanding different worldviews. As a result, the Arrows hire a training firm to conduct race-based sensitivity trainings for their employees, including the managers, coaches, players, part-time and full-time staff. In regards to an intervention, the staff are educated in the proper ways to identify, diffuse, and resolve racial incidences in their ballpark. Additionally, the entire organization recognizes their role in promoting racial tolerance and education within their community. In this example, the leadership involved organizational leadership, and as a result, an intervention, and it also involved taking a leadership role within the local community in regards to racial tensions and other social problems. Research, intervention, and evaluation. All of these things are processes that never end. You're going to constantly evaluate, reevaluate, and reevaluate. As a result, you will constantly be researching, and you will be constantly involved in different forms of intervention as ideas change. You, as the researcher, are going to be crucial to this process. Why? Because you are the one asking the questions. You are the one that decides how to measure and how to gather the information. You are going to be the one that analyzes and then disseminates the information to everyone. And you are going to be the person that pushes for information to be incorporated into the decision-making processes of everyone within the organization. And the best way to do that is to incorporate it within your own decision-making processes. That's what research does. It should inform and educate and then impact. Research is the epitome of applied learning. And it is the epitome of applied learning because it is concerned with real-world consequences, outcomes, and how these decisions are going to be made. And that's what the goal of the class is. The goal of the class is to integrate research, social scientific concepts, ideas, and theories into our industry and our understanding, ultimately, of sport, recreation, and physical activity. In our next 3 sections, we're going to understand how psychology, sociology, and social psychology specifically can integrate into those processes that we just talked about. Specifically, these areas within social science are very important in the theory or the hypothesis areas within the research process. For example, sociology takes a look at how the fitness industry is based on racial, gender, and class lines. As a result, the previous ideas we have about how people work out or how they consume exercise is going to be influenced by these sociological patterns in society and or culture. That's how all these things are going to integrate together.